all-new iPad Air, which is still available but $100 cheaper. So the iPad Air 2 is thinner, much more powerful with an A8X processor, which has 3 cores and 2 gigs of RAM. This is the first iOS device to have more than 1 gig of RAM. We also have a new iSight camera, 8 megapixels instead of 5. We also have a new FaceTime HD camera, which is kind of lifted from the iPhones. We also have a new optically bonded display, which is now laminated to the glass so there's no air gap, so that improves contrast, color quality, refraction, as well as an anti-glare coating on the glass to make this the least reflective display of any tablet today. This is 18% thinner, is available in gold in addition to silver and space gray. We also have 3 capacities, 16, 64, and 128 gig capacities at the same pricing of last year's 16, 32, and 64 gig capacities. You also have an LTE version which now features Apple SIM, which is a SIM that works across carriers. So instead of buying a specific iPad for a specific carrier, instead you just select your carrier from settings, which is very interesting. And of course, Touch ID has finally been added to the iPad. Alright, so let's get to the unboxing so we can take a close look around. So on the box you can see we have the iPad in profile, highlighting the fact that this is razor thin. In fact, it's 18% thinner at only 6.1 millimeters. So that makes it thinner than the iPhone 6 and also makes it the thinnest tablet available right now. Now, the first thing you notice when you pick the iPad Air up out of the box is just how thin it is. It's also very thin and rigid. That nice solid metal construction. Now from the front it pretty much looks identical right away. Now that gold color is very vivid, more vivid than the more champagne color of the iPhone 5S, but identical to the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus gold color. So if you don't like gold, this may not be the best option for you, but you do get a white glass bezel, which I prefer personally on the tablet because it shows less fingerprints. Now in terms of accessories, of course, we have our literature packet, which includes a quick start guide, some regulatory information, and Apple stickers. Behind that, we'll find the Lightning to USB cable for charging and syncing your tablet. Now we also have a 10-watt power adapter for charging the iPad. That's smaller than the 12-watt that ships with the iPad Air. And that's because this has a 15% smaller battery than last year. But because of the A8X chip, which is more power efficient, they've been able to retain the same battery life as the iPad Air. Alright, so let's boot up our iPad Air 2 so we can take a close look around. So something new for an iPad is Touch ID. So this time when setting up your iPad, you're prompted to set up Touch ID, which is pretty basic. It's just like an iPhone. So this can be used with Apple Pay as well as making purchases in the iTunes Store. Now with Apple Pay, of course, you do not have the ability to take your iPad to an NFC terminal to pay. Instead, you use Apple Pay for web browsing or web shopping. But interesting enough, there is an NFC chip buried in here according to iFixit, so maybe that'll be activated in the future, but who knows. Now along the right side, you'll find your volume controls, which pick up the design of the iPhone 6 with that recessed edge. Now what's missing this time is the physical switch. So this is the first iPad to eliminate it. This could be configured for either mute or rotation lock, but of course all of that can now be controlled under Control Center. Now at the top you'll find your sleep wake power button, and at the far edge you'll find the headphone jack, which is almost as round as the tablet is thin. So you have to wonder just how much thinner they can make this tablet before they eliminate the headphone jack or find a different design for the headphone jack. Now if we look at the new iSight camera, again we go from 5 megapixels to 8 megapixels with 1080p HD video recording at 30 frames per second. You can see that the module itself is a little simpler. It's just a piece of glass instead of a piece of glass with a metal surround. So a little simpler, a little cleaner design. You can also see that they position the dual microphones next to the camera. So you'll find one right next to the camera and one next to the camera on the edge of the iPad. This used to be located toward the top of the iPad in portrait orientation. Now at the bottom we'll find the Lightning connector flanked by stereo speakers once again, but the design has been updated and kind of resembles the iPhone 6 with a single row of drilled holes instead of the double rows from last year's iPad Air. Now on the front toward the top we'll find our FaceTime HD camera along with an ambient light sensor right next to it. Down below, of course, we'll find the new feature Touch ID, which features a sapphire lens over the sensor along with a capacitive ring that surrounds it. Now with Touch ID and Apple Pay, we do have a few new control panels under settings that are not available on the other iPad. So you'll find, for example, Touch ID, so you can add new fingers or delete your existing fingers or rename them, that sort of thing. You can also go to Apple Pay to add new cards, enter in your information. Control Center has also been updated for the lack of the physical switch on the side, so now we have toggles for both rotation lock and mute instead of one or the other. Now the camera app has added a few new features here. One of them is time-lapse at 120 frames per second. So not 120 or 240, which is available on the iPhone 6. We also have a new burst mode, which is much faster here. Again, very similar to the iPhone 6. We also have a new and improved FaceTime HD camera, which incorporates burst selfies from the iPhone 6. So all you have to do is press and hold the shutter release, takes a burst of photos, and then you can go to the editor and select your preferred photo to save. Now, in terms of camera quality, again, we have an 8 megapixel iSight camera with new and improved sensors, new and improved optics, and the A8X image signal processor, which improves performance. So again, solid results are a huge improvement over the iPad Air or the iPad Mini or any other iPads before it. Now, this isn't the same hardware as in the iPhone 6, so we can't expect the same performance. Of course, we do not have an LED flash, but results are pretty impressive. Again, 1080p HD video and really solid images as well. And we also have those dual microphones for excellent audio pickup. Now, this camera also features software stabilization, and it does a pretty good job here. So I can walk around with my iPad, not intentionally trying to hold it steady, but just walking. It does a pretty good job kind of ironing out those bumps, but not perfect. Now, unfortunately, this camera does not feature continuous autofocus. So once you start recording video, you'll have to tap the screen to change focus. Alrighty guys, Mike here, the Detroit Borg, testing out the new FaceTime HD camera, which appears to be the same one in the iPhone 6. Has the same f2.2 aperture, which lets a lot more light in, a better sensor. Now this still records video at 720p. This is still 1.2 megapixels, but the quality is much improved. And again, we have those excellent microphones